Hey, Scott, how you doing?
I'm great, Lisa. How are you doing?
Good. So first things first, is your family well? You're well? Everybody that you know and love, everybody's staying healthy?
They are. I actually think I
Good.
had this back in February, to be honest with you. Obviously I couldn't get tested, but, when you look at the symptoms, and it was a very mild case, it was nothing like what we're tending to read about in the news media. And so I've actually, been out a couple of times every week. And so it's been interesting. I think the whole situation has been very interesting for our country.
Why don't you tell everybody where you live and what your background is so that we understand why this conversation today is something that we should pay attention to?
Sure. I've been in the tennis industry my entire career. I'm currently the director of the tennis management program at Methodist University, the PTM program there. We're currently the largest and been around, I guess, about 30, 40 years now in producing college students to get ready to go into the tennis industry. Prior to that, I've been a college coach for 3 different colleges, and I've developed junior tennis players as well. I've actually had 71 junior tennis players go on to play college tennis. I've been real fortunate to have some great kids that I've been able to be a part of their life and their development. So really enjoy the tennis industry and just glad to be a part of it.
And you've been an official too at junior events.
I have. I've been a referee for junior tournaments for, I guess, about 25 years now. At a lot of tournaments around North Carolina. I actually did the USTA National Boys 12s clay courts down in Lake Nona a few years ago as well. So
you have a variety of experiences in the tennis industry, in the tennis world. You continue to stay involved in tennis. Last year, we did a podcast together, and then
with Gary.
And a few days ago, you posted something on Facebook that caught my attention, and I shared it in the Parenting Aces group where we have more interaction than we do on this page. And it kind of led to us, you and I, exchanging a couple messages and figuring out that we needed to do this today and have this conversation because there's a lot going on with college tennis, and a lot of families, for them, college tennis is the carrot. It's the thing that we all want for our children, and for a lot of our kids, it's the realistic goal. They may say they want to be number one in the world and emulate their favorite pro player, but for most kids, college tennis is an achievable goal.
It is, and a lot of people don't realize that playing college tennis is a very achievable goal. Matter of fact, there's positions every year that do go unfilled, where coaches wish they had players and they don't. And I think that what we have developed as college tennis, as we all know it over the last 15 years, 20 years, is definitely about to change. One of the articles that you're referring to that I was talking about referenced how college tennis may be amongst the sports that disappears from colleges. How the athletic departments are focused on the loss of revenue and looking to cut expenses. Matter of fact, I think it was about a week ago, several of the commissioners of several Division I conferences and their athletic directors petitioned the NCAA to drop the minimum of 16 sports as a requirement to be in NCAA Division I, which means that they're really looking at, how do we reduce expenses? They just lost as a group $375 million with the NCAA spring basketball tournament. And who knows what's going to happen to, if football can't play this fall. And unfortunately, in college tennis, we're a non-revenue sport, such as baseball or soccer or volleyball. And we're going to have to find ways to show that we're relevant. And I'm afraid it's about to change significantly.
Well, let's point out that the NCAA did decide not to cut the number of
Yes.
number of sports for D1 status. So that was good news. We think, we hope. I mean, it's got to be, right?
I think it's great news that they denied that. However, I still think there's going to be changes coming down the pipe. Dan Beebe, who used to be the commissioner of the Pac-12, presented an idea that a lot of that's, I guess, taking some hold in college circles is that we have revenue sports and we have non-revenue sports. And he went so far as to say that we quit giving scholarships to the non-revenue sports, which obviously, just as you said, college tennis is the carrot for our junior tennis players and their families. That's a significant change. And I don't think it will come to that, but it would not surprise me if we do have some changes over the next few years, trying to find a way to mitigate the cost of non-revenue sports while continuing to enhance the, for lack of a better word, professional sports such as basketball and football that do generate the millions of dollars for the colleges and universities, so they can then have the non-revenue sports. So I do think changes are coming. Now, whether that's in the form of maybe there's, a conference for football and basketball and then a totally separate, more local conference for the non-revenue sports, or, finding other ways to manage that. A lot of times with small Division I schools, they only have a roster of 6 or 8 students. And when you look at the Division II schools and Division III schools, which use college athletics to drive enrollment, you'll see 12 or 15, or in our case at Methodist being Division III, we have 26 guys and 18 females on our men's and women's teams.
Really?
We do, yeah. And that's because of the tennis management program. And like most small schools, we use athletics to drive enrollment. So I think we may see some of that trickle up, so to say, into the small Division I schools.
Interesting. Well, and for those that aren't familiar with the different divisions in college tennis, and I don't know the background of everybody watching this right now. So at Division I, you can offer athletic scholarships. For tennis, it's 4.5 on the men's side and 8 on the women's side for a fully funded program. Not all Division I college tennis programs are fully funded. So that's the maximum. Division II can also offer college tennis scholarships. Division III cannot offer athletic scholarships, but they do offer academic scholarship money. And oftentimes the money that a student athlete can get from a Division III school is as much, if not more, than they would have received at a Division I program. NAIA, I'm not as up to speed on NAIA and junior colleges. They do not fall under the NCAA guidelines. They are outside of that. And so, sorry, Marcus is just making a comment. Let me just read that. Rumors are that they're going to have an appeal meeting next month for Division I reductions and plans for universities to show their losses on the books and projected losses if they do not get the reduction. Interesting. I mean, I think schools are scrambling right now and they're trying to figure out how to stay in business.
Well, and it's interesting that you say that because, there's so many converging factors, and you can't just use this as a silver bullet. There's no one silver bullet that got us to where we are, and there's not a silver bullet that's going to get us out of this. When you look at colleges and universities, there's several of them closing down around the country right now, just because the number of high school seniors that are even available to go to college has been dropping for about, I think it's 4 or 5 years now, and will continue at least through 2025. Where the number of high school seniors going to college will be reduced significantly. And when you also factor in the cost of a college education and people weighing whether, is it worth taking on the student loans to go get a college education, or should I just try to do something else? That's going to have an effect in it. And if you also look at restaurants and food and beverage establishments around our country, they're the largest employer in our country, if I'm not mistaken. It's somewhere in the top 3 or 4 in our country, from what I read. Well, a lot of those who are not going to college were taking jobs in that industry. So if that industry now is going to have, be decimated, let's say, for lack of a better word, of what's going on with our country with the the virus, then maybe that will mitigate some of that. But it's very interesting to see all the different confluence of factors coming in and how that's going to affect not just those that are going to colleges and whether colleges stay afloat or don't stay afloat, but also college tennis programs. And one of the things, as you mentioned, the different levels, one of the things that started happening, I guess it was in the 80s and early 90s, you had a lot of NAIA schools who transitioned to becoming NCAA Division II. And when they became NCAA Division II, they started using athletic programs to drive the enrollment. And what a lot of people don't understand is that it's something we call the discount rate. When a non-student athlete comes to a university, typically the discount rate for that student is around 25 to 35%. And the discount rate is the amount of institutional aid given to that student. So if a college costs $40,000 and the discount rate is 25%, then that means that that student is really only paying $30,000 because $10,000 of that is coming from institutional. And I don't mean loans or Pell Grants or things like that. I'm talking about institutional aid. When you look at a student athlete, that discount rate jumps typically to somewhere between 65 and almost 80%. So when you look at a school, say like a Brevard College in Brevard, North Carolina, which was NCAA Division II, and of their 450, 500 students, 430 something of them are student athletes, they're paying almost for those students to go there. So there's no net amount for that school to stay afloat and paying their bills. And so when you talk about small schools adding sports, they're trying to add sports to bring in the non-student athletes. That is what helps an institution or a university stay afloat. And so when you put that in combined with everything else, there's going to be a lot of small colleges and universities around the country that are struggling. And just forget about athletics. They're just going to be struggling in general.
Wow. Well, Marcus just clarified too about JUCO. He says they don't follow a rule program. And he says where he is, they have up to 11 male scholarships for the community college team that's funded by a family endowment. So, so there you go. They're not reliant on the institution to provide that money necessarily. But Scott, what you're saying, I mean, that's really scary that, or maybe it's a good thing. Maybe it's like everything else that things have gotten so out of control with college tuitions. They were continuing to just escalate year by year by year,
right.
So much so that a lot of schools were offering students a way to lock their tuition for the 4 years or 5 years that they were going to be there, so that they weren't subject to those increases each year. So maybe this is an opportunity for everybody to reset. Certainly we need that reset in junior tennis and junior competition with all the travel and the expense around developing junior tennis players. Maybe that same kind of mindset is going to infiltrate other businesses and institutions like our universities.
I agree. I mean, I think we were already discussing this a year ago in colleges and universities that, the schools who are not being efficient and are struggling. There's another school here in North Carolina, Montreat College in Asheville, that was literally close to shutting down till a donor gave them $3 million to stay open a couple of years ago. I think we're going to see a lot of universities that, never mind the athletic side of it, they are going to struggle to stay afloat. And it would not surprise me for us to see in the small Division I schools some of what's been happening at the smaller schools, the Division II schools and the Division III schools, where athletic directors you need a roster of 12 or 15, so that way we can justify your program staying afloat. A lot of times coaches, myself being a college coach, that's a lot of people to deal with a practice or in trying to manage it and trying to give equal time to everybody. So, I think it's definitely going to change what's going on with college athletics, and especially in regards to tennis. When I was coaching at Queen's University in Charlotte, I had a roster of 12 players, which is what we were looking for. The college actually wanted me to have, I think it was 14 or 15. And of course, when you're dealing with that many players, it's difficult as a coach. It's difficult to give everybody the appropriate amount of attention.
Right. Diane's asking, when you have those big rosters, how many actually travel with the team?
Sure. For example, when I was at Queens, we actually had a travel roster of 7 or 8. And then what we would do is, because we were limited to 25 dates, we would actually schedule 2-a-days a lot of times and play 2 different teams on the same day. So that way we're able to get everybody, matches. It wasn't like somebody would not play, and that's one of the things we're actually dealing with at Methodist with 28 guys, or I'm sorry, 26 guys and 18 girls on the team, females on the team. Not everybody's getting to play, and we only have 20 dates at the NCAA Division III level. So we're actually getting ready to restart our club team with the tennis on campus for USTA, and other things, so that we can get them matches and get them play opportunities.
Right. I mean, I don't know. This whole thing is, I have such mixed feelings because, like I said, on the one hand, we really need some significant changes in how tennis is structured, and the whole issue of not awarding scholarships to the Americans, but having too many, and that too many is relative, international players on rosters, and the American players not feeling like they have equal opportunity or whatever. I don't know how I feel about all of that, really. I've kind of changed my views over the years as I watch my son go through his college tennis experience, but I just feel like the expense of junior development, coupled with the expense of a college education, whether or not you have a college athletic scholarship to play tennis, has just gotten to be so outrageous. And I'm not sure that the value is necessarily still there for most families.
I agree with you. And I think it's a decision that each family has to decide what they're looking for. Junior tennis is so tough. And I think some of the changes that are being made by USTA with now the Net Generation Tour, in addition to the 7 national levels, I think that's going to help. I think it's going to give some, for lack of a better word, some realism to parents and players about where they really truly fit. I'll never forget, having run junior tournaments. I was at a tournament a few years ago. There was a boy in the 14 and unders who's talking about playing on the pro tour. And I'm like, okay, you're 42 in North Carolina in the rankings, and you're talking about playing on the pro tour. Now, I'm not, trust me, I am not someone to crush somebody's dreams. And God bless him if he can do what it takes to get there and do that. But you also have to understand the price that goes with that. I've always said that a goal is a dream that you're willing to pay the price for. If you're not willing to pay the price for it, it's just a dream. And I think that there's a lot of people in junior tennis who are dreaming. I was very fortunate to work with Ty Kwiatkowski for 7 years. And, here's a kid that's, top 10 in the country in the 12s as a 10-year-old. And then he's, the number 1 blue chip recruit. He wins the NCAA Division I title in singles, and, struggling to make it on tour. And, it's so hard to make that. And so I think with junior tennis, parents and players are going to have to decide what's best for them. Just to give you an example, one girl I coached, she didn't have the resources to play the national level. When Ty was playing, he was spending $35,000, $40,000 a year just on travel and playing tournaments in a given year when he was in 12 and 14s. This girl, Kirsten Ward is her name, her family didn't have the money for that. And so when she was in 12 and under, she played a few nationals to see how she did. She got the top 100. And then she made a conscious decision to only play North Carolina tournaments in higher age divisions until she could do that in the 18s. And then when she was 15, she was actually top 15 in the South, and, was able to, in the 18s, and was able to start playing at that level again. And it saved them obviously tens of thousands of dollars through the years, because she just couldn't afford to do it. So I think every family's got to decide that.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a huge financial commitment. We've known that for a long time. The college carrot has become further and further away, to more and more difficult to reach. If you do reach it, it's not as significant on the male side. For females, if they get the scholarship in D1, it is a full scholarship, but there's still costs involved with attending college. Even if you have a full ride, there's still cost to having your child go to college, especially if they go somewhere out of state or out of driving range. So, it's a tough call. I'm just sorry, I'm distracted because we have a lot of comments coming in.
Yes, we do. Mark and Marcus both are making some great comments.
Yeah,
but my
also,
question would. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, one of the things is this whole question of the role of high school tennis in all of this, and could high school tennis play a bigger role? And I know USTA has been talking about that for a very, very long time, but I haven't really seen some hardcore changes happening at the high school tennis level in terms of opening it up and inviting those players to participate. Though I know Lou Brewer, when I interviewed him, talked about that was one of the goals of this new 7-level system that USTA is going to implement beginning in January 2021, was to have a place for high school players to kind of jump on board the junior comp train, so to speak. And right. I know UTR has done a lot of work around opening up competition for kids who were traditionally just playing high school tennis, but have decided they want to kind of dip their toe in the more individual tournament kind of field. And so UTR has kind of stepped up and filled that gap. Sorry, I'm just looking at these comments. Sure. Are coming. Thank y'all so much for engaging with us. But Scott, I interrupted you, so go ahead.
No, you mentioned a minute ago that there's this huge cost with junior tennis, and I don't think it has to be. And I think the thing that has happened over the years, as I said, it's not any one thing that has led us to where we are. I think part of it is college tennis has led us to where we are. Part of it is, the enrollment-driven use of athletics, especially at small schools, and then, the financial drive of the larger Division I schools with football. But it's also in junior tennis as well. I mean, there is a tennis academy on every block. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry has their name on a tennis academy now.
That is true.
Yeah, and that used to not be the case. You used to have players who did play high school tennis, who also played tournaments and didn't spend $50,000 a year to get a college scholarship. I don't think it's necessarily a requirement. I think we have made it a requirement, and a lot of us in the industry have built businesses off of this model. And, is it going to be the end of that business model? I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I think what will actually drive that, as anything, is supply and demand. And, I think the parents are going to be probably a little more cautious and a little more educated going forward as to, wow, do I really need to spend, $10,000 or $15,000 a year on my kids' tennis and hope for a return? So I don't think it necessarily has to be that way. But I think it's going to depend on what happens with college tennis as the driving force for that. Yeah. Your comment about high school, I think one of the things that makes it very difficult for USTA or any national organization to have an effect on high school is that high school tennis is treated differently in every state. Some play spring, some play fall. Some states have co-ed teams. So I think it's different in every state, and that makes it very difficult.
It does. And, it's so funny because I was just interviewed for another platform, and one of the questions was about my own tennis experience coming up. So I had to sit down and kind of think about, my tennis development. I was not very good. But in 8th grade, I was in a private school for 2nd through 8th grade. And as a private school, the 8th graders had an opportunity to play on the varsity high school tennis team. And so I was on that varsity team, and my doubles partner was also an 8th grader. We actually won the state doubles high school championship that year as 8th graders. And it was awesome. I was terrible. It was totally my partner carried the duo, but what was so interesting
I'm sure you held your own.
Well, what was interesting is that I get to Georgia and I have a kid who plays tennis, and we look at what high school tennis was like in Georgia. They don't have an individual tournament in Georgia,
right.
Only team. And so he didn't have that opportunity to win a state championship as an individual. The team won his senior year of high school, which was a really cool way to culminate his junior tennis. But, the kids don't have the opportunity to compete as individuals in Georgia. Now, every state's different. So it's a difficult situation, but that's one of the highlights of my junior tennis is winning that state high school tournament.
Absolutely. And that's the thing I think we get away from is that everybody's trying to take the same path to get there. And there's so many different ways to get there. There's so many different paths to enjoying your junior tennis. And whether that's ending up playing at the Division I level, the Division III level, you listen, having been around tournaments, you see so many kids and or their parents. I'll never forget, I was at a North Carolina Level 5, which is a novice tournament a couple of years ago. And this 10 and under boy is playing his first tournament ever. And his dad's running around talking about him being a future U.S. Open champion. And again, I don't want to quash anybody's dreams, but I'm like, I looked at the dad, I was like, hey, let's just play the first match. Let's get this going. And, when you look at the number of players who make it to the pro tour, and when I say make it, I'm talking about that they get to, let's say top 200 or top 300, where they're really not making a living. They're not making it. They're not the Djokovic, and that's a whole other discussion we can all get into. But, it is such a low percentage, and people just don't realize that. Even being able to play at a Division I school on a, I'm not going to say a full ride, but let's just say, the maximum scholarship you can get, because we all know that on the guys' side, with Title IX, they're not getting full rides, or very few. It's so hard to get there. And there's, I've also seen where it's not always one path. Everybody wants to make it one path, but it's not.
Right.
And,
even within the same family,
absolutely.
Same family. Right.
Absolutely. And to me, one of the things I've said in tennis, I feel like we do an awful job of parent education. And honestly, before your website came along and your group, parents, they were just learning from each other, and they still do. Whatever Susie's doing, okay, well, we're going to do what Susie's doing. Mm-hmm. Well, that may not be the best path for you, but that's what they're doing. And, and it's the easiest way is to go spend money. You can spend money and go play 14,000 tournaments and, travel wherever. But that's not the best way. And it doesn't have to be that way.
Right. Well, I think, one of the good things coming out of this shutdown, and let me just say that tennis in some areas around the country is reopening. So there are areas that we're going to start to see competitions. I mean, we're already seeing it. I'm getting text messages all the time from people opening up and offering competition opportunities. I have my own feelings about that if you want to follow me personally, you can read them. But I think this has provided us a real opportunity to have these conversations and reformulate our message about why tennis is so great as a community. We can, as a tennis community, a global tennis community, reformulate that message to stress the lifelong aspects and lifelong benefits that kids gain from playing this sport. It's not just about winning championships. It's not just about getting scholarships. It's not just about, winning Wimbledon. It needs to be about the life lessons and the opportunities and the relationships that you can form as a result of participating in an individual sport, where it's you out there laying it all on the line, or you and a partner out there laying it all on the line, and taking personal responsibility for things like that. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see if that messaging is adjusted as we start to roll things back out. For me personally, through Parenting Aces, through this platform, I have tried over the 8.5 years that I've been doing this to talk a lot about relationships and life lessons, and picking coaches that stress character and those types of things. Sometimes I feel like it falls on deaf ears, but I'm gonna keep saying what I'm saying, because for me, that's what keeps me involved in the sport. It's the relationships, it's the life lessons. And I've shared, numerous times now about my son's experience interviewing for his first job, and the fact that when he was sitting in job interviews, pretty much the entire interview centered around the fact that he had played a college sport. It wasn't around anything else. It wasn't about other job experiences or hobbies or anything like that. The interviewers were intrigued by the fact that he had competed, had committed to playing a sport at a high level. And, I think that speaks volumes about the value of putting your kids in this sport. And
Absolutely.
I think we need to start stressing that even more.
And I, in my opinion, as I said, I think it's on many levels. I think the parents need to do more research. They need to make better decisions for their kids. I'll give you an example. I was at a tournament about a year ago, and there was a 10 and under match on clay courts on the orange court with the orange balls in front of me. And, the whole purpose of the red, orange, green is so that kids who are 10 and under can actually play the game as though they're, 18 and under. And yet what's happening is they're moonballing. And what's ironic is, I know these parents from seeing different tournaments, but I don't know them. And they're over there just complaining about the moonballing and just running around. So I walked over, and for shock effect, I looked at them and said, well, it's your fault. And I walked away. And in about 5 minutes, a couple of the parents walked over and go, well, wait a minute, what do you mean it's our fault?
This is why I love you, Scott.
and they're like, what do you mean it's our fault? And I said, look, I know you guys are in Charlotte. And I said, I know you guys just switched coaches about 3 weeks ago. And I said, I know from my experience having, developed the players I've developed through the years playing at those levels, it takes me 2 years to get a player, whether they're 10 or 15, from point A to top 15, top 20 in North Carolina, where they're now getting towards the higher level, where they can play the game. And I said, but you won't give the coach that opportunity for 2 years, because if your kid's not winning in 40 days, you're taking them to the next coach down the line. And I said, so you have got to find somebody you believe in, trust, and give them the opportunity. And you know what? Your kid's path is going to be different than somewhere else. The 71 I've had go play college tennis, I've had, I think it's about 20% of them use a one-handed backhand. I've had several of them use two-handed backhands. As a coach, you have to mold the player and not just say, okay, well, we're going to do all this or do all that. Harry Hopman, he was such a great inspiration to me and such a great coach, because he took the player and what they brought to the game and made them the best they could, and not just, okay, well, there's only one way to skin the cat, so to say. And so I think parents have to do it, and I think we as coaches have to do it. We have got to educate our parents to know what they're dealing with. We're the professionals, and they don't know. They don't understand. I have a girl that I've worked with for the last 2 years. She's 13 years old, now 14. But at the time, she was 13 years old and 5'11", and tagged the ball. I mean, when you watch this girl hit on the court, you're like, okay, what country does she play for? What college? But I have not and will not push her to ever go play that level of tennis. She will probably end up playing at a very small D1, maybe a D2. Why? because she'll never play the Tar Heel qualifier. That's their family vacation weekend. And so I know that her family is not committed to doing that junior route. Now she may, and it would be awesome if she ends up playing at a Chapel Hill one day, or, a Power 5 program that's top 20 and maybe have a chance after that. But I'm not going to push that at a 13 or 14-year-old because I know her family doesn't value what she would have to do to make that track. So I'm not shortcoming her. I'm not, treating her any different, but I also realize there's going to be some limitations for a while until she decides what she really wants to do. And I think we as coaches have to realize that and not just try to push everybody and only focus on the ones that quote unquote make us famous. The players are not here to make us famous. We're here for them, and we're here to make them better and reach their goals. They're not our goals. All of our days are done. My playing days are long done, but we're here for them. They're not here for us. And so I think this predicament that we're in as an industry is that there's the college side of it with the Division I tennis and the football and basketball revenue and what that's going to end up doing to the non-revenue sports. There's the small colleges at Division II, Division III, NAIA, that, just the demographics of what's going on with college age students and having the higher discounted rate student athletes driving the enrollment, which is going to it's really going to put the financial burden on a lot of schools. There was an article written in the Winston-Salem Journal last week about the transition of UNC Pembroke and Francis Marion from the Peach Belt, which is a very heavily funded Division II conference, to Conference Carolinas, which actually I think has a scholarship limit still of about 2 for men and for women. So it's very lightly funded athletics. And he was saying it was because of COVID. It really wasn't because of COVID. It was the financial pressures those schools were feeling trying to compete in one of the toughest conferences in Division II for years. But that's part of it. Part of it is the parents, making better decisions for them and their families and not chasing points and not trying to, Johnny, I'm living through Johnny and Johnny's going to be the best dang tennis player, and part of that I think comes from the, used to with media, we didn't know what happened around the country. I remember when rankings were produced once a year on a sheet of paper that were mailed to you.
Yep.
And that's the only time you knew where you stood. Otherwise, you just had to guess. And, now it's like instant gratification. And I know how somebody's rated in Washington State. And so, and then you got the tennis pros who have made a business model. Some of them have made very profitable business models out of developing junior players and playing the system. And I'm not saying it's wrong. It's what, it's economics, but I'm hoping that the economics will change. And I'm hoping that, what happens at the college level will change and bring us back, and I'm starting to sound like the old geezer, the old grandpa now, back to the old days. It's not really what I want, but I do want us to find an equilibrium somewhere from where that equilibrium has been for the last 10 years. Because I think it's warped our perspective on our sport.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Scott, thank you so much for sharing your perspective. I'm getting a bit of echo in my ear. I'm not sure where it's coming from, so I hope y'all aren't hearing it. But I want to thank you so much for coming on and engaging in this conversation. And for those of you that are watching and typing in the comments, thank you so much for engaging with us, because it helped us kind of formulate our conversation today. And I really appreciate those comments. I want to just say a couple things. One, this conversation, we're going to upload it as our podcast this week. So hopefully in the next hour or so, it will be available through all the podcast apps and whatever. It's also, the video portion will be available on our YouTube channel. So if you want to go back and watch it, you'll be able to do that. And I also want to urge the parents that are watching, yesterday's USTA webinar was about how parents impact a child's tennis experience. And there was some really good information in that webinar, also some great adjunct material, some links that USTA provided for parents. And we have a link to that webinar on our COVID-19 resources page at ParentingAces.com. So if you didn't get a chance to tune in yesterday, I hope you'll check that out. It was really, really good. Oh,
it was
Scott,
a great webinar.
Yeah. Scott, you have a former player of yours.
I do. Matt Caldwell down in Anderson, South Carolina.
I love that. Hi, Matt. Thank you for watching. And you had a great coach. You're a lucky guy. So
he's a great guy. He really is a great guy. He was a great kid too.
I love that.
Funny kid. Also, Lisa, just to let you know something I'm working on.
Yeah.
You know, in addition to running the program at Methodist, I'm actually working on my doctorate right now as well. But we're starting a website called tennisparented.com.
I love it.
So that way we can hopefully get information out there on different things, and you know, things like I've been posting this last week, and that you post all the time, whether it's about college tennis, junior tennis, you know, just trying to help them understand how to navigate the pathway so they can make good decisions. So we'll have that up here in the next week or so.
Fantastic. And we'll add a link to that on parentingaces.com as well. And, you know, Scott, anytime you want to do this again, I am always here and always love talking with you. You have some great wisdom and insights to share with all of us. So thank you so much for doing it. Stay well. Everybody watching, please stay well. If tennis is reopened in your state, please go back with caution and follow the CDC guidelines on how to be out there safely. And just everybody take care. And I'm looking forward to seeing all of you in person at a tournament, who knows when, but hopefully soon.
Well, Lisa, thank you for having me. And thank you to everybody who's been watching and the comments you've made. If there's anything I can do to help, please, you know, reach out, Lisa, whether it's helping you guys out or anybody that's out there, let me know. Be glad to help in any way I can.
Fantastic. Thanks, guys. Have a great everybody. Stay well.
Thanks, Lisa.